Hey, everybody, Patrick Verno here. Welcome to day 7 of the Leadership Bridge Awareness Week. And there will be a day 8. You can sort of think of this as the baker's dozen version of Awareness Week. And what I wanted to talk about today is the last behavior of the model that I use quite often with leaders, with teams, and it's called cables. And the whole idea behind cables is it's based on 6 behaviors that each one of these behaviors, these individual cables, creates a bridge. And that's really what we have with those people that we work with, or that we're around. We're building bridges, and each individual person that you deal with is its own bridge. The behaviors that have gone back between the two of you really determines what the strength of that bridge is, what the quality of it is. And if you think about it that way, right, as a leader, when you're thinking of how do I develop my own leadership, how am I doing? Imagine that those relationships are bridges, right? What does that bridge look like? Is it rusty? Is it something that you don't want to cross? Does it have potholes? Is it closed? Is it a bridge that you don't even want to cross anymore? Or is it, in pristine condition that you know that you actually enjoy crossing this bridge? The views are great, whatever it might be, but we all have different bridges or different conditions to our bridges with those people that we're around. And these behaviors that I've been talking about over the last week are really those things that create this. And they're the central theme in the middle section of the book that is going to be published at the end of this month, which is called The Leadership Bridge: How to Engage Your Employees and Drive Organizational Excellence. And really, that's what we're trying to do, right? Is we want to engage our employees, and when we do that, we drive organizational excellence. And I know I've mentioned this in the past that organizational excellence is not about just profitability; it's about culture. And to me, profitability, that's a byproduct of culture. That when we have the right culture, when the right bridges, the strong bridges are built, profitability really is just is a byproduct. It arrives based on the environment. So today, what are we going to talk about? The last cable is around what's called specifics. That's the S in the cables model. And specifics is about setting clear expectations. And I mentioned in the preview of this that my own experience has been in working with organizations, with teams, with individuals, that when there is oftentimes conflict or disagreements, it comes down to not having clear expectations. I think we're seeing it quite a bit now in terms of hiring, that are onboarding, that when people come into organizations, if they don't have a clear understanding of what's going to be expected of them, and also I think if the manager doesn't have the hiring manager, whoever that is, doesn't have a clear understanding of what this person is hoping to achieve by coming to work for this organization or this role, then we're going to run into problems. That's inevitable, because what's probably going to happen is that I remember the things that I thought I was going to be doing in this job, and I get into the role, and all of a sudden I'm like, wait a minute, what I was told and what I'm doing right now is not the same thing. And I think a couple of things that I had mentioned in one of the earlier episodes was around some of the data that has come out. And right, there's data on both sides of this. I would bet that people that have left are very happy. A couple of the more recent ones that I've seen, one was a survey by Grant Thornton, a consulting firm, that they had surveyed about 5,000 individuals and found that of those 5,000 that had recently changed jobs, 40% of those were considering another move. There was an article about a week ago in the Wall Street Journal that also talked about almost buyer's remorse, people leaving organizations and regretting that they had made this change. The grass isn't always greener on the other side. And I would argue that oftentimes that's because we didn't have clear expectations in regards to what was expected of us, or what the job entailed or what I was going to be doing. But there's another part, is that if there were clear expectations, they weren't followed through. Right. So we've got two parts to this in regards to specifics. First, we need to be very clear in regards to what the expectations are. The second part of this is we need to be in a place where we create ownership around what the expectations are. And you notice I used ownership, even though I've mentioned accountability before. Accountability is one of those words I think can have a negative connotation to it. And this is not about coddling people and snowflakes that we can't be held accountable. It's that when we think of the word accountability, it's often punitive. If I were to say to you, you're going to be held accountable for, for your performance just now, I don't think many of us are going to be like, oh, good, I can't wait to be held accountable for that. It has a negative connotation to it. Whereas we need to look at this more in terms of when we have clear expectations, we get buy-in in regards to what those expectations are. And we talk about that in further chapters in the leadership bridge around resistance. What are the reasons that people resist where we're asking them to go? And there's a model that I use in there called GREAT that is all based on research around influence and persuasion. But when we have clear expectations, but we don't hold each other accountable to those, right? Ownership to those, then we're going to have problems. And we can see this often happens. Let's say that there's an expectation that somebody starts their workday at 8 a.m. and they continue to roll in at 8:10, 8:15, and nobody says anything to them. Well, what does this do? It starts to set up this environment where people resent either the manager or that person because I feel like this person doesn't have to follow the same rules that everybody else follows. And if this person is called out for that, if the manager says, look, you need to be here at 8 o'clock, here's the reason why, and here's what the consequence is going to be for not doing that. If the person continues to show up late or maybe goes for 3 weeks on time, and then on week 4, they start slipping into that old pattern again. Again, what happens is it sends a message to the team, to the individuals, that the rules don't apply. We don't really have to follow them. And when that happens, we do create environments of conflict and disagreement, and it really causes a lot of tension. So we need to have both clear expectations first, right? What do we need from each other? And there are examples that I talk about in terms of how we can do that, right from the get-go, in terms of understanding what each other's expectations are. And then really after that is we need to make sure that we take ownership in those, that we all adhere to those and hold each other accountable to those. I'm not opposed to using the word accountability. I just like to set it up to make the sort of the understanding as to why we need to look at this more like ownership than just accountability. And if you think about this, we started off this week when we talked about Cable's behaviors, building that bridge with other people. We started out with congruence, right? We started out with congruence. So if one of your values or the company values is around integrity, then I would argue that if you are setting clear expectations and you're not taking ownership in those, or you're not holding each other to adhering to those, then you're out of integrity. You're not in alignment with integrity because you said that these things were important, these things were going to be upheld, and you're not following through on that. You're not in alignment as the leader, as the manager. So I think it's important to recognize how this comes full circle in regards to the behaviors that we talk about in terms of building the strongest bridges. That's really all that we're doing here. We're building bridges with those people around us, and setting clear expectations and then holding ownership to those is vital. If we're going to build the strongest bridges, the best teams, we're going to create an environment where there is a drive toward organizational excellence. That's how it's going to happen. So tomorrow we'll talk about really wrapping things up. What does this look like as a whole? How do you take some of these things and implement them tomorrow in terms of building better bridges with those people on your team? Because when you do that, I promise you, you're going to strive to really improve everybody that's around you when you do this.